Your staff, the Palestinians who worked for MSF, or Doctors Without Borders, were concerned about your safety.
We would have died within a week without them. They are the only reason we are alive. They didn't leave our side for a second.
You're the national staff.
The national staff.
Because they feared for your safety, even at the border crossing.
We're watching these incredible men who have sacrificed everything for us, who have sacrificed time with their families, their own physical safety, their own water supply they were giving to us. And we're watching them fight to get us across the border, knowing that we were not bringing them with us. And I was texting them when we got the evacuation orders, and I said, did any of you move south? Did any of you get out? Like, are any of you coming down this way? And the only answer I got was, this is our community, this is our family, these are our friends. If they're gonna kill us, we're gonna die saving as many people as we can.
That was Emily Callahan, an American nurse with Doctors Without Borders. She happened to be one of the hundreds of Americans who was in Gaza and luckily was able to evacuate Gaza recently. She left last Wednesday. Now, she made clear during her interview with Anderson Cooper on CNN that she and members of her staff would not have made it alive if it had not been for the Palestinian doctors who risked it all to get her and members of her staff to safety. And she began the interview by basically talking about the horrific conditions on the ground as the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, continue their aerial bombardment of the region. Let's watch.
We were relocated about 5 times over the course of 26 days due to security concerns. And one of the places we wound up was the Khan Yunis training center. We call it KYTC.
That's when people had evacuated to the south. So you were in the south of Gaza at that
when we
point.
went to below Wadi Gaza line. And there were, by the time we left there were 35,000 internally displaced people living alongside us. There were children with just massive burns down their faces, down their necks, all over their limbs. And because the hospitals are so overwhelmed, they are being discharged immediately after, and they're being discharged to these camps with no access to running water. There's 50,000 people at that camp now and 4 toilets. They're given 2 hours of water every 12 hours.
There's 4 toilets for 50,000 people.
Yes. And that's where we were living too. And they have these fresh, open burns and wounds and partial amputations that are just walking around these conditions. And parents are bringing their children to us going, please, can you help? Please, can you help? And we have no supplies.
Now, a little later in the interview, she talks about how Palestinians on the ground sacrificed their supplies to keep her and members of her staff alive. Before we get to that, Cenk, I'm actually a little surprised that this interview even happened on CNN, just because after Israel created that 45-minute video and showed all the reporters the terrible terrorist acts that were committed by Hamas, everything changed and CNN kind of went from trying to be fair and balanced to all of a sudden like, let's hyper focus on what happened to Israelis and ignore what's happening to Palestinians. But it was good to see this interview.
Yeah, it really was. I actually think that, yes, I totally agree with Anna that after Israel showed the video of what Hamas did, American media seemed to be turning, but they've turned back now. And so what have they turned to? I think they've turned to being largely fair, which is fairly unprecedented in American media, especially on the issue of Israel. I mean, there's a lot of media critique we've done on this show for sure. But the issue where they've probably been the single most unfair is on coverage of Israel and the Palestinians is in the 21 years that we've been doing this show. And so before, Palestinians were never represented as human beings. They were represented as potential terrorists, current terrorists, dangerous, violent, or just non-existent, invisible. Never a story about their humanity and how it's a kid who's got the burns all over his body, et cetera. Never humanizing them in any way, shape, or form. But whenever it came to Israel, it was like, oh my God, and they should be. The outrage over someone who's been killed in a terrorist strike or burned or damaged in some way. There's nothing wrong at all with showing Israelis as human beings. That's great, that's wonderful, you should do that. We're all human beings. But it was never reciprocal. You never saw it. It was just a constant smear of Palestinians as some sort of
a threat.
A threat and violent, as if they're all one creature, right? And as if Hamas or terrorists represent them all. Just the mere discussion of children in the area is new to American media. Like, because once you start talking about kids, it starts to click for the average person. Oh, I have a kid. Well, I know that my 8-year-old isn't a terrorist. That's ridiculous. Oh, their 8-year-old is like my 8-year-old. Look, here's one way of thinking about it. There's at least 4,000 kids who were killed already, right, in Gaza. And a lot of them are babies. Yeah. And a baby isn't Muslim or Christian or Jewish, it's just a baby, it doesn't even know what its religion is. So you drop a bomb on a baby, you kill a baby. It doesn't have anything to do with Muslim, Palestinian, Jewish, or Israeli. And so, just seeing this nurse describe the humanity of Palestinians should be relatively normal. But what's amazing is that this is a breaking news story that American media is covering Palestinians as human beings. And I'm not trying to, for the last 20 years, blame them for all that they did wrong. I'm just incredibly relieved that they're finally doing the right thing now and treating them as humans.
I guess we're switching things up a little bit today because I'm gonna be a little more critical of media than you are, but I don't think that this just happened organically with legacy media outlets. I think that this is a result of all of the independent reporters out there, all of the independent reporting out there that is shedding light on the reality of the situation on the ground in Gaza. And that content is obviously getting a lot of attention. And when there's like a vacuum left behind by corporate media or legacy media in that they just don't cover these types of stories, it just leads to added pressure for them to be a little more fair in their coverage of it. So I don't really care how it finally came to be that they're a little more fair in the way they report it. I'm just happy that they're a little more fair in the way they're reporting the story. But with that said, I want to go to the next video because in this clip, you're gonna notice how she talks about why she's alive, how she was able to make it out of Gaza in one piece. And she says that it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the Palestinians on the ground. Let's watch.
We're watching them fight to get us across the border, knowing that we were not bringing them with us. And they didn't waver. Ibrahim was right in the front with our passports, fighting so hard to get us on. And we get to Arish that night and find out his parents are dead. They were losing family members and friends.
You said if it wasn't for your national staff, you think you would have been killed by people who were just desperate.
We either would have starved to death or run out of water. They were the ones that negotiated all of that. Gaza's a small city, so everyone knows everyone, and they would call in favors and call their friends and say, who do you know that has food? Who do you know that's open? Where can we get this? And they would drive all over the place to find water.
By the way, driving all over the place to find water is obviously incredibly risky as an aerial bombardment campaign is underway, right? And she's talking about Gaza City. So this is an area that was dealing with intense aerial bombardment by the IDF. I mean, obviously the south of the Strip was also being bombarded, but not to the same extent. But I love that she's sharing this information with us all, right? Because it does fly in the face of this endless narrative about Palestinians posing this great risk as if they're like savages or something. Clearly, they're not. And even when resources are limited because of that humanitarian blockade, they're willing to share what they have to keep this American nurse alive.
Yeah, so not only showing Palestinians as human, but as heroes. Heroes that are protecting the people that they worked with, and then the tragedy, of course, and of losing their parents in that particular case. But I've now seen a number of stories. Again, it's shocking to see them in American media. If you don't live in America, you're probably not understanding what we're saying. Like, why? Why wouldn't it be normal in a conflict like this to cover both sides and the tragedies on both sides? It's just generally almost never happened in American media. So now you hear stories of people who helped others, and then they come home and find out that their kids have been killed, and their entire family's wiped out while they were busy in a hospital or in some center bandaging up other people, rescuing other people. And you see the stories of Palestinians saying, we're not leaving our home. The last time we left our home, we never got to go back. And that's what was called the Nakba, the catastrophe. And so they're gonna have to kill us here where we stand. And unfortunately, that's exactly what Israel's been doing.
In fact, the nurse actually addresses that. I want to go to that last clip. Let's take a look at what she has to say.
I would like to send out a reminder that there are civilians seeking shelter there, and that my doctors and nurses didn't leave out of loyalty to their community. And I know that there is an idea being pushed right now that anyone that stayed behind is going to be considered some kind of a threat. And I want to remind people that the people that stayed behind are heroes. The people that stayed behind they know they're gonna die.
Just incredibly powerful, and it takes a tremendous amount of courage and selflessness to do that. And she's speaking for them. She's speaking for the Palestinian people who, for the longest time didn't even have a voice in our legacy media outlets. And I'm so grateful for her for doing that.
Yes, and we should take action on it. So you see the tragedy. That tragedy is paid for by us. That kid's burns are done by bombs we financed. Those families that are dead think we did it because we paid for the bombs, we paid for the weapons, we financed Israel, and we're backing Israel 100%. Right now, the US is asking for a humanitarian pause, which is, look, let's be honest, it's a joke. Pause meaning like an hour or two. And Netanyahu says, yeah, we'll do a ceasefire for a while as soon as they give all the hostages back. In other words, give me all the hostages and I'll give you a ceasefire for maybe a day, maybe a couple of hours, and then I'll go back to bombing your families.
Wow, art of the deal.
Yeah.
So smart. I mean, who wouldn't take him up on that?
So
he doesn't care about the hostages at all. Let's just be clear, okay? Because if you know that you have innocent Israeli civilians held as hostages in the Gaza Strip, maybe you would think once or twice before doing the aerial bombardments that the IDF has been engaging in. I find it hard to believe that he really cares about the hostages.
America needs to stop greenlighting these atrocities, and that's what they are. They're absolute atrocities, and I don't want my money going to it. You shouldn't want your money going to it. You should demand that our politicians stop serving foreign countries, defense contractors, donors, and start serving us. We didn't co-sign on committing these war crimes. And we shouldn't send the right-wing government of Israel one more dollar since this is what they're doing with our money. And not on our watch and not in our name. If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.